So our topic for today is the value of education. This is a Google Plus Hangout sponsored and hosted by payscale.com. This has been a topic of great interest to us for a number of years. We have a couple of different data packages we use with our salary information covering whether or not college graduates really benefit from their time spent in college. We have some wonderful panelists today with us. I'm going to introduce them. I'm your moderator today. My name is Bridget Quigg. I'm a writer and editor here at PayScale and have spent a lot of time writing and talking about this topic, but I am not the expert, so I'm going to turn over the experts in just a second. On our panel, we have our very own Katie Bardaro. She's our lead data analyst here at PayScale and has spent a lot of time looking at the outcomes of college education for graduates. We also have Lindsay Childress with us. Lindsay's a middle school guidance counselor. She has an undergraduate degree in sociology from Texas A&M and a master's degree in counseling from Tarleton State University. Lindsay, thanks for being here. So this is our first time, for the record, doing a Google Plus Hangout, and we are going to do our best to work with the technology, but we're missing two other panelists at the moment. As soon as they come, we will have them join and we'll introduce them at that time. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. We have a few questions we want to address, and we'll be getting information from PayScale and from our panelists and from you. Please write us throughout the chat with your questions, and we'll pose them to the panelists and hopefully have a great discussion. I'll start off and lead into this first question with the fact that all of us are seeing in the news a lot of conversations about the crippling debt facing college graduates. They're getting out of school with not just $10,000, not just $20,000 in debt, but in some cases $100,000 in debt and no particularly great job prospects depending on their situation. Meanwhile, President Obama is talking about how he wants every American to have at least 1 year of higher education because he's sure that higher education is a key piece to getting a well-paid job. So people are sort of caught in this scenario where they want higher education, but it's expensive. So our first question is, how do you measure the value of higher education? I'm going to pose that question to Katie as an economist and salary data expert. And Katie, here's going to you.
Okay. So can everyone hear me? Great. So the measuring the value of education falls into two general paths. You have both the quantitative value of education and the qualitative value of education. Here at PayScale, we're a salary data company, so we tend to focus a lot of our research on the quantitative value of education in terms of what kind of salary can you expect, if you go in a given major, what kind of jobs are there for you, what kind of job prospects are there for you, are you going to be struggling trying to find a job if you major in a certain field or try and go into a certain field. So we tend to focus mostly on that value, and it's really important to understand that college has a large price associated with it, so you kind of have to be informed about the returns you can expect after college so you know if you can handle a given price. Because college is expensive, yes, but there is a wide range of costs available to you and a wide range of options for you to undertake in making the college decision. If anyone else wants to join in, feel free.
Thank you, Katie. Everybody can hear me? Lindsay, how about from your perspective as a middle school guidance counselor, what sort of advice are you giving to and talking to your students at that young of an age about thinking about higher education? I'm going to go ahead and sign off.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? I hope. Okay, good. What I usually tell my kids is I talk to them about what they want to do, first of all, because that's the most important thing to me from my part of it is what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And it's not necessarily about college. I know there's a huge push towards that, but not all of my kids, that's where they're going to go. So I talk to them about trade schools if that seems to be what they're interested in. I talk to them about, if college or a degree of some sort seems to be what they want to do, then I talk to them about, okay, have you thought about where you might want to go? We talk about junior colleges. That's another thing that I push big time with them just because it is less expensive. You can get a lot of those classes out of the way. They do a lot of dual credit classes at our high school. Our high school is really, really good with working with our trade schools around around the community and working with our junior colleges around the community. They do a lot of dual credit. A lot of our kids actually are graduating as seniors with 20 hours of college credit already that they had to pay a reduced amount for, but not near what the amount they would have had to pay for, and they've gotten a lot of their basics out of the way. So when they go to a junior college or they go to a four-year university, they can focus mainly on what their major is, and it costs them a whole lot less to do so. So that's what I talk to them about.
So, Lindsay, I have a question about that. There's sort of this idea that people want to have their college experience. Do you think for kids in that generation, they don't even consider that a possibility anymore, that 4 years of being a student and living on campus, and sort of the luxury of that now is it's seen more as a luxury? Do you think that's true?
It's harder for me because I'm not in the high school, so I don't know what the majority of the high school seniors are doing, but from what those that have come back and talked to me, those that I keep in touch with, it does seem a little bit less focused. A lot more of our kids are doing the junior college experience, staying at home, getting a job, working, and then, going to junior college when they can or at night or whatever the case may be. It seems like, yes, when I went to college, the whole, going away immediately, getting away from your parents or your hometown or whatever it is and doing that whole 4-year thing, even though you had no idea what you wanted to do, that seems a lot less of an issue now. It seems more of a what can I do for the least amount of cost in order to get where I want to go.
Interesting. Thank you.
Can I speak to that? Do you mind?
Well, I was hoping I could introduce you, Crystal, if you don't mind. I'm Bridget. I'm the moderator. Happy to have you. I just want to tell everyone that as you are, and you can say more about this, be a recruiting expert and marketing expert with a lot of online visibility in the space of education and jobs. So feel free now at this point to add to that. Thank you, Crystal.
Sure. Well, and actually, I'm talking, I guess, on this point from as a parent. I have 2 children, teenagers. One's in middle school, one's in high school, and I can say that pretty active in their schooling and their PTA, have been for years. And the kids that we're around, and my own 2 children, are very focused on that 4-year experience, almost like to the point where I'm talking to them a little bit about, hey, yes, you go for the dorm living and the socialization and learning how to be an adult outside of mom and dad's house, but you're also going to have to figure out what you want to do, and that needs to be equally as important. You need to give yourself some time to figure it out, because once you're done with college, your path gets set fairly quickly, and it's not something that's as easy to change once you get out into the professional world. And if anything, that's the disconnect that we see here, at least in Texas and the Midwest area. I hear a lot of that. There is some disconnect, I think, between getting college-age students, and I guess as far back as middle school, because my own kids, to understand that you're about to choose what you're going to do for the next 50 years. Realistically, as Social Security and retirement ages continue to get pushed back, we are literally looking at working into our 70s. And that's a long time. And it's also a big decision for someone who has no real-world experience or understands really how they fit in positionally to the rest of the world. So if anything, I think that there's some value to extending the amount of time that we provide education for our young people so that they can be a little more ready to take on the world. I think we do a poor job overall of transitioning them from education into the workplace.
Lindsay, I see you nodding a lot. Would you like to add something to what Crystal just said?
I do agree with that big time. I think our kids they feel so much, I don't know if it's pressure, but they're so ready to move on with, and I agree exactly that they get out, that some of them are 20 years old when they graduate because they've gotten so many dual credits, or they've gotten so much extra ahead of time that they get out and they have no idea what they want. I have this degree in art history because that's what I was interested in, but I have no idea how to do that or what I want to do with that, and they don't end up using that degree at all, and they flounder for several years. And I have seen that in my personal life. My brother's fiance is going through that right now, and I've also seen that with kids, that have come back to me after having graduated high school. I absolutely agree that even though there's a cost there, that needs to somehow, there's got to be there is a disconnect there with trying to get out so quickly because of the cost, but at the same time trying to figure out what the heck it is you want to do for the next 50 years.
Well, and do you not have the same, like my children, I try, but they have no concept of cost. So, like, we can discuss that
this is an age-old discussion, Crystal.
Exactly. I mean, we can discuss that it's going to be extremely expensive, but $100,000 for a Stanford education doesn't mean anything to my 13-year-old. Like, she gets that it's a lot of money, but she doesn't understand where that comes from. It's not a concern to her. And, I mean, I can project that out to my daughter's babysitters and to kids that I talk to when I'm going out to talk to high schools about college and career and all of that. And it's the same kind of thing. It's like, well, mom and dad will take care of it because mom and dad always have. Well, then project that through education. Now we're done with college and we're into the work world. We've not really taken care of anything because mom and dad always took care of it for us. But by the way, can we now make $80,000 and manage your people?
So I want to get to Katie with a question about that. But Crystal, from your perspective as a recruiter, that's what's going to be my question for you. So you're seeing people looking for work. Mm-hmm. And are you finding, I mean, are some of them reconsidering going back to school? I mean, are they finding they're hitting a wall and they're just not finding jobs because they don't have the right background?
Yeah. Okay. So I think that really first became an epidemic, and I'm going to use the word epidemic because I think it was worldwide around 2009. You saw a little bit of it with the housing bubble burst in 2007, 2008, where there were just so many out-of-work construction workers and home salesmen and stuff that didn't have anything else really to go to. So that, yeah, they went back to school because after you've been unemployed for a year, what else are you going to do? You know, at some point you feel unemployable in your current situation, and you might be. But what I've not seen yet, and what I think we might see in the coming 2 years, are the kids that went to school, and I say kids like I'm terribly old, but, you know, I've been out of school range for about 15 years now, and so you see the people just graduating in the last couple of years that have spent $60,000 on an education to work at Starbucks for $6 an hour after you average in tips, and it's not working for them. And so, yeah, they are starting to go back to school, and I think we're going to see a larger volume of that. My brother was caught up with that in the housing market. He is now going back to school to be a physician's assistant in cardiology. But it took him 4 years to figure it out.
Right, yeah. Well, Katie, you have a lot of perspective on, in terms of value of education, the costs of school versus what you can get out of it, certain majors being more lucrative. Can you give us a little perspective from what pay scale is seen on the difference certain majors can make for people's earnings?
Sure. So, let me take my headphones off. Basically, when people are making the college choice, even if they aren't sure of what specifically they want to go into, people tend to have an idea of areas they're strong. You know, are they a science person, a math person, an art person, a humanities person, or are they a professional services type person? And we put out a package every year, the college salary report, that looks at the pay by major for bachelor graduates and really gives a perspective on how wide the spread is. So you have, you know, your engineers, especially petroleum engineering, way up at the top in the in the 6 digits. And then you have social work, elementary education, theater, you know, some of the still highly valuable for the country, but low-paid jobs near the bottom. So if you kind of have an idea of what field you want to go into, you should factor that into your college choice. You know, for example, if you know you want to go into social work, or you know you want to go into community planning, or you really feel like you really want to help out organizations or communities or people, unfortunately those jobs don't pay very well, so you shouldn't go to a top-end private school to get a degree in that because it'll take you forever to pay off that education. You should go to an in-state public school, go to, like Lindsay was saying, go to community college, get a lot of your credits out of the way, so then you can transfer to a 4-year school to complete the degree. Really factor in what you could be earning in terms of your college choice. That being said, I also wanted to add on to what Crystal was saying about additional education. So there's this big push for everyone to get a college degree, and so it's in some ways going to make the college degree ubiquitous with a high school degree. You know, if everyone has it, it no longer separates you apart. It makes you seem, you know, special in terms of your preparation. So there is a big push to get additional education for that reason, and for the reason that there's just no jobs, and people think, well, getting more education will help me get a job. But that's not necessarily the case. We'll start to see this whole education bubble burst where people are just getting more and more education to try and prepare themselves and in some ways closing themselves off to other positions. I'm experiencing this in my own life. My husband actually got his PhD and has been on the job market for over a year now. And he's now gotten the problem where he's overeducated for positions. And even if he's willing to go to do some very simple menial task job, no one will hire him because they say, well, you have a PhD, you'll just leave if something else comes up. So you almost pigeon yourself into a hole sometimes. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, that more education isn't always the best thing. And you should really kind of research the opportunities available and make sure that the additional education you get doesn't pigeonhole you into very specific tasks.
That's great. Thank you, Katie. Which kind of moves us well into our next question, which has to do with if the average student is paying somewhere on the order, I mean, at this point, a lot of students are in the $15,000 to $20,000 a year for college range. When is a college degree worthwhile? That's sort of our next question. And I think Katie's comments on what you major in having a huge impact fits that really well, and she mentioned some majors. But how about, Lindsay, could you just speak to that? In your mind, when you talk to the kids you talk to, are you pushing them towards certain subjects or trying to help them understand sort of the outcomes they'll get from following their interests in school, whether if it is art or if it's engineering, you know?
Really what I do is, because they're so young, you know, when I see them, really what I do is I mainly talk to them about what their interests are and try and lead them in. I try and give them several different avenues to pursue. I don't want to, you know, pigeonhole them into, okay, well, you can only go to here. And so I talk to them if it looks like maybe, you know, there's some camps that I know of that kind of lead towards that. You know, as 7th graders or 8th graders, I get their parents involved and say, hey, you know, Johnny said that he wants to be involved in, you know, he likes to do engineering, building robots, things like that. And so there's a camp that I know of, you know, for a week in July. Here you go. I really, I don't talk to them more about like the benefits of it along the way. If they, you know, show me an interest in like doctors or lawyers or things like that, we do talk about, okay, you're going to have to get more than the one degree that, you know, with doctors it takes an extra amount. We go through all those steps and talk to them about that. And by the time I get done with how much schooling they have, their eyes are about as big as their faces because they have no concept of time or of money, and just like what Crystal said, you know, of how much things cost or things like that. But that's what I talk to them about, and then they're like, okay, well, and we talk about, is that something that you're willing to, you know, put all of that work into in order, is that what you want to do? That's the side that I more come from is, you know, you're going to spend 10 years working on a degree, you know, pre-med all the way up to being a doctor, and then if you specialize even further than that, is that, you know, something you want to pursue? And we don't talk about it on a very deep level because when they're 14, they're like, 10 years? Heck no. But you know, that's where I come from with that, as far as like, is it worthwhile to you? That's where I make that connection.
Pay attention to their interests. Katie, how would you answer that question? When is a college degree worthwhile?
Sorry, okay. Very similarly to what I was already saying, is that you really have to factor in what you can expect after your degree in terms of a financial return before you go for your degree to determine if it's worthwhile. Also, you know, a lot of people discredit trades, and as Lindsay was saying, that's not really a good thing to do because unlike a lot of other professional jobs, those jobs can't be outsourced. Those are jobs that we're going to need and always need and continue to have people or openings for people who want to go into that and are interested in it. And especially some of the ones that deal with apprenticeships like plumbers or electricians, you know, elevator mechanics, they do really well. They can earn a very, very good salary and actually when all is said and done do better than people who went to college when you factor in how much people had to pay in for college education. So for a lot of jobs, there is also the thing to keep in mind that the job that you might want that's a college round job, there might be a very similar job that you don't need a 4-year degree for. You know, for example, if you want to go to be a nurse, you know, it's very common to get a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing or a BSN, but it's still pretty common to get an ASN and do really well. Or even if you don't want to go for a full community college degree, maybe you go to be a certified nurse assistant or a licensed practical nurse, something that's a little less education but still gets you in the field. You can work for a little while, figure out if you want to do the higher level job, and then go back to school for it. And in some cases, if you do that and you're able to get your foot in the door, especially in an industry like healthcare that's just going to be growing as the baby boomers get older and sicker, is you can get your foot in the door and sometimes have an employer even help compensate for your educational costs. This is also true if you're oftentimes in the business field and you want to then go for your MBA. A lot of times people are just going straight to MBA school right after undergrad, but it's not necessarily the best option. If you can find a job, work a couple of years, get some experience, decide if you need the MBA, you might be able to have an employer that will help compensate for the costs you incur.
I think we all need Katie to counsel us on how to spend our money. Crystal, you made a comment.
Oh, sorry, I lost the sound.
That would be my fault. So I just was joking that we need Katie to counsel us on all our economic decisions in life. But Crystal, you had a comment here back when Lindsay was speaking, and there's a psychological side to that as well. Could you tell us what you were thinking and any other
Sure. So there's a couple of things. When you look at being overeducated, there's from the employer side of things. When we look at masters, doctorates, definitely, advanced degrees, Ivy League schools, where there's extended periods of stay, so you didn't just go for your bachelor's, you stayed at the Ivy League school for your master's and then stayed again for your doctorate, especially when there's no break into the working world and then a return, you get psychologically graded on that. So why did you stay? Why weren't you biting at the bit to get out there and get money? What does that say about your ability to make decisions? You know, can you lead, or are you one of those people that are more comfortable following? You don't know whether the person is or not, but you can look at the trends. So just as you look at financial trends to kind of look and see how things are faring, we look at educational trends when we're looking at employing people and how that person that we employed, how did they work out? And then how did that next person that we employed in that same position with their educational background, was it similar, was it different, how did they work out? And over time you establish these trends. And what you see is often the more advanced the degree, the harder it is for them to actually execute on decisions. They get into this mode of analysis by paralysis, and that's detrimental to most businesses. So, you know, is it a universal truth? No. But, you know, is someone with that degree likely to be judged on that depending on the role that they're going for? Yes. So at that point, I would highly recommend to those people to look at positions where that degree is going to be respected. And you're going to see a lot more of that in like geochemical roles, academic advisory roles, certainly strategic roles, strategy roles, things where they're expecting you to do a lot of analysis is probably where you're going to have the least amount of resistance to your degree. But if you have that degree, then what you need to, and you don't suffer from that problem, you know you can execute, you know you can lead. Do yourself a favor and show those examples on your resume. So, you know, and if that's just you just got out of school and you don't have working experience, you need to start talking about the involvement that you had in clubs, the involvement that you had in associations, fraternities, sororities, whatever, you know, volunteer positions where you had the ability to make some sort of, to exercise some independent or limited judgment so that people can see that you can execute and you're not going to just get stuck in books. So that's, I mean, that's the one side of it from the employer end. But the other thing from the last, or the current question, you look at money, and money is important. Like, you're never going to hear me say that money doesn't matter. It clearly does. But so does your lifestyle. And one of the things that I think Gen Y and, you know, the younger generations are really highlighting for us burnt out Gen Xers and baby boomers that are going, when do we get to retire? Yeah. Or maybe can we take a break? Is that our life matters too. And so you need to kind of think about how you want to spend your life. I use my personal life as examples for a lot of things because it's just easy to relate to. I have two daughters, and one of them is extremely driven. They're both very smart, but one of them is extremely driven, and she wants to be a doctor or head up a business or take over the world. I don't know. I'm afraid of the dictatorship that would ensue. But like, she has these goals that are very driven. But she spends her free time, how she likes to spend her free time is learning and earning money and leading people, and all of her activities and stuff bend to that. That's fun for her. So she could get into a position that would require more responsibility and more work hours and stuff like that, and she'd enjoy it. It wouldn't probably compromise her way of life. Conversely, I have another child that's looking at education because she wants to spend her summers outside and she wants to chill out with her friends. And, you know, I did talk to her about how much more work there is than what they discuss on, you know, what you see with your teacher. To Lindsay could probably speak to that very well. But, you know, but she has this quality of life in her mind on how she wants to spend her life. And she's willing to balance what she earns to be able to get it. And I don't think that's something that we at all prepare people for at any level. You know, and that's when you look at why people leave. Why is it? They've gotten burnt out. They don't make enough for the number of hours that they put in, or they don't like the stuff they have to put up with for what they're getting paid. So I don't know. I'd like to see some of that brought into college curriculum, maybe down into high school curriculum when kids are starting to set themselves up for college. Because if you've looked at that lately, I really looked at my daughter's freshman intake form, and it looked like she was signing up for college classes. I mean, you picked tracks at ninth grade. That's 14. That's crazy. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. You can say that. Thank you. That's really interesting information to get on that perspective on just the payback or the quality of life question that so many people aren't talking about as much. We had a question come in from somebody who's watching and listening in. Aubrey is asking, does PaySchool have tools that can help make the decision on whether or not to go for an advanced degree? Katie, could you just go ahead and address that question? We've talked about PhDs and masters, and I know you've talked a little bit about that. Katie Bardell, could you?
Sorry,
okay, yeah,
I was trying to unmute.
No problem.
Yes and no. A lot of our data is mostly focused on undergraduates, people who are making the undergraduate decision. But for the people who do go on to get advanced degrees, in our research center, or the PayScale Research Center, we do a lot of kind of popularity or rankings where we show which jobs are common for you to have an advanced degree, which kind of industries is it common for you to have an advanced degree. So at least you can get a little bit of an idea. If you want to go into biopharmaceutical research, then it'd be a lot easier if you get your PhD in organic chemistry. So it gives you an idea of where it's more common. The other thing I would say is that we do release packages on pay for people who get their law degree, and people who get their MBA, and people who go on to get advanced master's degrees. And similar to bachelor's degrees, there's a really wide range in pay for master's degrees, and also to what Crystal was saying, a really wide range in quality of life. People who get their MBAs in investment banking and are working in New York, they're working 15-hour days pretty much every day, sometimes on the weekends. If you go on to get your master's in theology and you're teaching like a church youth group or working at community college teaching, it's a little bit more flexibility in your schedule, but a lower pay. So you kind of have to balance what is more desirable to you and to yourself. Do you value free time, having time for your family, being able to go on hikes whenever you want, or do you value having a lot of money in the bank? There are positions that are kind of in the middle that you could have, a decent amount of money and a decent amount of free time, but if money is important to you, you want to focus on that, or if free time is important to you and you want to focus on that, it's pretty telltale in kind of the pay or the quality of life measures of these various majors where you should go to make yourself happiest.
Thank you, Katie. That was helpful. So it sounds like a lot of salary information that can be helpful in figuring out just by comparing different salaries of people who have those advanced degrees or not. But not maybe the college salary report type information. Our next question, I think I'd be interested to hear what Crystal has to say from her perspective, which is how does choice of major affect college tuition return on investment? So we all know that college is expensive, but from a recruiting perspective, you know what certain people are paid, and especially people with different, college choices they've made. How would you answer that question? I'm curious. I know Katie's going to have her data scientist perspective, but what would your recruiter perspective be? How does college major choice affect tuition return on investment, in your opinion?
So it's going to vary by where you are in the stage of your career. For example, when you are first getting out, I would say it has a large effect on it because you don't have any work history to go along with that education. As you, by the way, can y'all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. As you go along, it becomes less of an impact. You're going to see it really diminish around that 7-year mark because at that point you have a substantial enough work volume. I mean, your assets that you've more or less, I call them assets because your accomplishments basically are your career assets. You have a large enough volume of that to be able to overcome the fact that the degree may not be in the discipline that whoever put the job description together really wanted. Not always. Where you're going to have the best return, I think, is going to be more on your business-oriented, more generalistic business-oriented degree with a specialized minor. So get a bachelor's in business administration with a minor in marketing or finance or some other business discipline that you can then use in a wide variety of positions. You may also want to look at, I talk a lot about human resources because that's the industry I'm in, bachelor in human resources, but put your minor in finance or marketing. Because if you're going to finance, then you have more of a Ben Comp, organizational development type lean. If you're going into the marketing minor, then you've got more of the recruitment, talent acquisition, culture, and communications slant. So it makes you more versatile, in my opinion. When you get a degree in Spanish or basket weaving or, when you get into more of the humanities type degrees, you really need to have a plan on how you're going to use it. So if you want to get a degree in Spanish, and I pick on that one all the time because that's my brother's degree, my recommendation for him was go get your master's degree because you're going to need to go put something with this that's going to make sense to people. If you're starting out and you haven't already gotten the degree, then make your minor, again, something like international business studies or that kind of thing so that you can go to a company and say, I'm fluent in this language, which is why it is my major. I minored in business or I minored in health or, I got my associate nursing degree, but I majored in this language so that I could help your customers or your patients or whatever. Then it makes sense and it doesn't look like you just spent the last 4 years messing around.
Very well said. Interesting. So getting that more technical training in a sense as well as pursuing sort of your passion or your artsier interests. Very good. Katie, we know you'll certainly have, and I know you've touched on this topic, but some intelligence to offer on how does your major affect college tuition return on investment. And maybe you could even describe for us PayScale's college tuition ROI package a little bit. I know it's complicated, but if you could put it in layman's terms.
Sure. So first, I do want to start off and say I 100% agree with Crystal. I think that's excellent advice. One thing that I have talked to reporters about in the past before is if there's something you enjoy, it's not necessarily something that will give you a good career. So oftentimes you have to be very smart in your educational choices and either minor or major in the thing you enjoy, but have something else to back it up that makes you more credible in employment. So I 100% agree with Crystal. One other thing we also see is that kind of analytical thinking skills are super valuable in today's world. We're very kind of we're moving into being a very data-heavy, very data-oriented world, and companies are hiring like crazy across the board in the data world. So if you have the ability or even the enjoyment, because you need to have enjoyment for data or for statistics or for math, definitely taking coursework in that I think is highly valuable for coming years. Talking about the college ROI package that we do, we factor in the cost that people pay for education, and we incorporate both the direct costs of the actual tuition, room and board, books and fees and supplies, but also the indirect costs of the income they lose out from going to college rather than just working straight out of high school. And we also factor in how long on average per school it takes people to graduate, because some schools, pretty much everyone graduates in 4 years. Some schools, it's harder to get classes, and it's closer to 5 or 6 years. So when you're looking at a per school ROI, it's important to not just assume everyone goes for 4 years. So that's the cost side. On the earning side, using data that we collect through our online survey over the last year, we sum up the median earnings of people who graduate over the last 30 years. So people who have come to our site in the last year but graduated from a given school over the last 30 years. So we're basically taking future earnings and discounting them by wage inflation. And we use this 30-year earnings as kind of being this is what you can expect to get if you graduate from the school with a bachelor's degree. One point that's really important to mention is we do not take major into account. So it's just the median earnings across all graduates, all majors. And when we do that, one thing that you do see is that the schools that bubble up to the top consistently are engineering schools. Because engineering is a program that is, A, it's hard to make it through, so it cycles people out of it. And B, there's a lot of job opportunities. And C, since it's a highly evolved technical field that filters people out and it's in high demand, that just drives pay up for that field. So those schools tend to do very, very well. Schools that tend to do not so well or tend to be near the bottom are ones that have a really high presence of theology, philosophy, social work, theater, arts, majors that just tend not to pay quite as well, but these schools are charging just as much as engineering schools. So the thing to keep in mind when you are trying to consider your ROI, like I've said, I think several times now, so sorry for repeating myself, is you should really incorporate kind of, if you don't know the actual major job you want to be in, you should at least incorporate kind of the general area you want to be in. Do you want to be in humanities? Do you want to be in arts? Do you want to be in social services? Do you want to be in physical sciences, biological sciences, math? I mean, Lindsay can maybe speak to this, but I remember when I was in high school, I basically had an idea that I like numbers. So I knew I wanted to do something with numbers. And so it's just something to keep in mind, that know what you enjoy and what you're good at. It's important to consider both of those, because you don't want to just go into something you're good at but you don't enjoy, because you'll never be successful in it. You have to both enjoy it and have an aptitude or be good at it or have a skill for it. And if that's art, then, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. The thing to consider is you don't want to go to a really expensive school, because chances are you won't become a famous artist with display work on New York. It's just not super common. But it doesn't mean you can't get a really good job as maybe a graphic designer for a company and work your way up to be really successful. So it's just important to keep in mind that the program you go for, at least the area you go for, do have different earnings associated with them. So you should factor that into your decision when you're trying to decide between, you know, public in-state, public out-of-state, private, you know, exclusive private, any of those kind of various schools, because they have very differing cost structures.
Katie, just as a follow-up question to that, I know I've looked at the college tuition ROI package from PayScale, and some interesting schools bubble to the top that are quite expensive. And then could you just tell us a few of the names, because I know that tuition at some of them is quite high, but yet the ROI, could you just give us a few names of some top schools that might surprise people?
In terms of costs, or?
Yeah, so for example, just give us the top school and an idea of their tuition, and yet top few. None of them are, some of them are cheaper. Do you want me to say what I think? Well, I'm thinking of MIT, for example, which is not a cheap school.
Yeah, so
maybe name a couple others.
So schools that are in the top, like I said, are really engineering-heavy schools. The two that are always battling for the top 2 spots are Caltech and Harvey Mudd. So a lot of people might not be aware of Harvey Mudd. I know I actually wasn't. I'm from the East Coast, and it's a California school. It's actually one of the Claremont colleges. And they are a liberal arts engineering school. So they're very unique. There's not very many schools like them. And they are part of this consortium of colleges, so they do have the ability to take other more liberal arts focused classes at these other colleges, but they themselves are an engineering focused college. So they do extremely well. They're very selective. Costs are very high. You know, they're definitely in 6 figures for your total 4-year tenure. They are typically a 4-year school. They do have the win of being a liberal arts smaller school. They're under 1,000 undergrads, so your classes are small. Your ability to get classes are a lot better than, say, you know, University of Washington. So you're able to get out in 4 years, which is a big win compared to a lot of state schools, because typically strong engineering programs tend to be at public universities. Another one, like Bridget mentioned, is MIT, also very heavy in engineering computer science. And Berkeley was our best public school. As you would probably guess, UC Berkeley was up there. And all the Ivy Leagues do pretty well. In fact, all of them are in the top 35. So as you can guess, you know, Ivy Leagues tend to do well. And that's tied to, I mean, maybe Crystal can speak to this, but there is definitely a, you know, alumni of Ivy Leagues and organizations that work for Ivy Leagues tend to take care of their graduates, and there's a lot of job opportunities for them, exclusively for them, or lots of firms that hire exclusively for them because they have alumni there who want to hire other Princeton grads or Dartmouth grads or Harvard grads, and they also just have a lot of notoriety about them, so they bring that win as well.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, because MIT and the Ivy Leagues are very expensive, but the ROI is still high. So that's interesting. I'm just noticing we had a comment from Crystal. Crystal, do you want to follow up anything? Then we have a couple more questions before the hour is done, so we'll get to those. But go ahead, Crystal.
Oh, no, I was just saying I grew up from the time that I was 8 until I got married, wanting to be a doctor. And I went to nursing school, was going to work my way up to your earlier point about how you don't have to start with the education and start with the associate degree and kind of work your way through. So went to nursing school and really loved the education part of it. Yeah, I grew up on a patient. It turns out I don't love mucus. So, you know, had I been exposed to that earlier on, I could have saved myself a lot of time in what I had spent building up on pre-educational classes, the tracks that I took in high school, so on and so forth, much more so now because they're so much more detailed now than they were when we were in school. It was kind of like, are you going to do AP or not when we were younger? Now they literally have tracks for kids that think they want to go pursue medical careers or business careers or whatever it is. And so I would say if you're in high school or even middle school and you kind of think you know what you want to do some research into what volunteer opportunities are available for you. Go work at a hospital. You know, they have the Candy Striper type programs, or go ask mom and dad if there's a summer career program, like internship program for high school and college kids, so that you can feel like you've gotten some exposure before you make this giant decision that you're going to be paying back over the next 30 years or so.
Thank you, Crystal. This is a great segue into the next question, which has to do with whether or not we should encourage the pursuit of trade certification type programs instead of bachelor's degree for certain students, or also there's online colleges versus traditional, on campus. But let's start with that question of trade certifications. Lindsay, maybe you can address this from your perspective. On the middle school level, what are kids hearing about what kind of jobs make sense or are cool? Or do you have anything at your school that exposes kids to the idea of pursuing a trade certification? Plumbing, electrical.
Yeah, we don't really at the middle school level have anything on campus that does things like that, but when the 8th grade and they start looking to be a freshman and they start filling out those freshman courses, our high school guidance counselors come down and they talk to them about, you mentioned tracks earlier, they talk to them about, well, if you think that maybe this is what you want to do, then, you go this way. If you think maybe this is what you want to do, you go this way. Our high school does a really good job. There's a cosmetology school about 15 minutes from my district that they partner with, and the kids, when they're juniors and seniors and are able to drive, they actually go and part of their day is spent at the cosmetology school getting that experience, beginning that trade school degree, so that way when they get out, they only have a little bit before they have their cosmetology certification. They do the same thing with, I believe, a welding institute somewhere close nearby. I know that they do a lot of stuff with that. Our FFA does a lot of stuff with that too, with different organizations around, in our community, to where our kids, and they see that, and the younger ones, the ones that I work with, they see those older brothers and sisters or their older friends, doing things like that, and they are considering it. A lot of their parents are pushing those kinds of things too from the cost side of things, but they are considering those kind of things. I think there's real value in exposing our students to those kinds of things so they can find out whether that's something they want to do or not. And if it is, then great, and they're already part of the way there. If not, then, like you said, it may be a volunteer experience that, okay, I don't want to do that, and I go on to a different thing. What Crystal said a few minutes ago about volunteering and doing internships and stuff like that to find out what it is you want to do, I think is spectacular. And I think the trade schools and what my district specifically is doing to help the kids just be exposed to more than just the bachelor's degree track, I think it's a really good thing.
Thank you, Lindsay. Katie, did you want to add something to the trade and certifications discussion? Because I know that PSCO has a lot of data on the results of pursuing those careers.
Sure. One thing I would say is college has almost become the way people view it as a right rather than a privilege. So a lot of people make the decision to go to college because that's just what you do after high school, and they don't really consider these other paths that they could take that they could be, very happy and do very well in. So, I know I saw it when I taught at the university that there are a lot of people who are in there who have no reason to be in there and no real desire to be in there other than that's what they think they should be doing. So I think programs like what Lindsay was talking about are super important to get people more aware of these trade programs, because there aren't a lot of high schools, at least that I'm aware of, that do that kind of information. And we have seen in our data that, it's very possible to do perfectly well with a trade school background or, a certificate background. And the big win is obviously you don't have as expensive of a schooling, but the second big win is like I said before, those are jobs that are never going to go away. People are always going to need to do them. They'll always have openings. Is that going to be true for a computer programmer? Hard to say. Is that going to be true for an accountant? Also hard to say. So the service industry is an industry that we are going to continue having job openings in, people will continue to be able to find jobs in them. Will they be high-paying jobs? Not necessarily. Doesn't guarantee that it won't ever be a high-paying job. You know, there's plenty of hairdressers who work their way up and do really well. You know, but like I also said earlier, there are trade positions that do really well. You know, on average, it's not just the very top-paying people. Elevator mechanics is one. Certified electricians, plumbers are another one. Welding people are another one. Landmen are another one. You know, we have those in Texas who do very well for the oil and gas industry. So it's something to consider, and definitely something to keep in mind, that college isn't necessarily the right choice for everybody. And you know, in Gen Y, those of us in Gen Y and the new Gen Z, we have the ability to research these opportunities on our own, and you kind of need to have a little bit of drive to do it, because schools aren't always going to do it for you.
That's great. Thank you, Katie. Crystal, you had an interesting comment about respect for the degree you earn from employers, particularly on the online degrees. Could you talk a little bit more about that, too, now that we've covered the trade certifications?
Sure. So, I mean, whether you're looking at a certificate-type degree or you're looking at going with an online education route, there are several schools now that are for-profit private institutions that offer very strong educational programs, but they're not well respected necessarily by the employers. Some are, some aren't. A lot of it has to do with where the accreditation lies. And that's something that at 18 or maybe even 50, depending on your exposure to the educational systems, you have absolutely no idea what that means. And I know even in my own personal life, how I came to know that that was important was because I got an online college degree. I went to school for almost 4 years. I spent $40,000. I still have $33,000 left on my student loan that I'll be paying back, and it does absolutely nothing for me because it's accredited in the wrong region. So when I go to apply for jobs, which I mean I work for myself, but when I was applying for jobs and would interview with companies, I would have to say, yeah, I have a degree. I don't list it on my resume because it's not from the council that you want. But here it is, and here's what I did, and da-da-da-da. I have enough work history that doesn't really bite me very much now. Am I going to end up running a global Fortune 500 company? Nope, absolutely not. It limits you. But it's something that can be gone over. However, had I known then what I know now, I could have chosen a different school that maybe would have allowed me to go to school in the exact same manner, but would have been more respected by employers. So what I would say is if you're looking at going back to school, whether it's to get a certification, an advanced degree, or for the first time to be able to fit work in while you're going to school, think about the field you're wanting to go into. If you're wanting to be a nurse, go talk to some hospitals and see if they're going to hire you with that degree. You know, if you want to be in business administration, go talk to some of the HR departments at local employers at different levels. So, in other words, go talk to a giant Fortune 100 company or Fortune 1000 company, and then go talk to a smaller mom and pop business and see how they respond to that. Some will care and some will not, but they'll be pretty upfront with you about what they'll think of it, and that'll at least let you know what you're getting into upfront. Oh, I can't hear you.
Yep, no, I'm back now. That is some great advice to go actually speak to employers before you even start your classes. Great idea. So we're coming near the end of the hour, and we have one final question. I thought it might be great if we could just get each one of our panelists to answer it as sort of a send-off. And any other last thoughts you want to share with the audience? The last question is, to ensure job security and a healthy income in our economy, is a bachelor's degree enough? However you want to answer that. Lindsay, can we start with you?
Absolutely. I think what, I just lost my entire thought.
I can re-ask the question if you would like.
No, that's okay. I have it right here. I just have to look at it. I lost my whole thought. I do think that bachelor's degrees, and someone said it, I think Katie said it earlier, bachelor's degrees are becoming more of standard. It is the thing to do to get out of high school, to go immediately into college, even if you have no idea what it is that you're wanting to do, to graduate with some sort of degree and then come out of college at 22 and not have a clue, so need to go back and do some more stuff. I think that bachelor's degrees are becoming the thing. And while I don't think that it's necessarily the thing for everybody, I think it's very suitable for some people, but I agree with what's been said. It's not suitable for everyone else. I do think that if you go and get a bachelor's degree, it's coming to the trend of that's not enough, that you might have to go back and get a master's degree or possibly even a PhD depending on what your field is, even if it's not cost-wise, if it's not wise, you know, financially, it may be what you have to do in order to be competitive. I don't know because, you know, I don't sit on more of the, you know, hiring side of things, and so I don't know what they look for, whether a bachelor's degree is, you know, good enough for a lot of the jobs out there, but that's what I'm seeing. A lot of my friends, a lot of my family, you know, myself included, had to go back and get a master's degree in order to continue doing what I wanted to do, to be competitive in the job market.
Great answer. Thank you. Crystal, a couple minutes for your answer. Job security and healthy economy, is a bachelor's degree enough? I think you're still muted.
I was still muted, sorry.
No worries.
It's going to depend on how old you are. If you are just getting out there in the world and you are under the age of 25, yep, you need to go back and get your bachelor's degree. For the majority of the positions that you're going to want to fill, sales may be an exception. There are obviously some trade positions that are exceptions, but for the most part, a bachelor's degree is going to be required. If you are in your 30s or 40s, you need to be speaking to your employers and the employers of your choice, the people you want to go work for, and find out whether or not it's a requirement for them, because at some point your work experience may or may not be enough to satisfy that gap. You just need to understand that there will come a point in time where you're going to be put up against someone with a similar experience set, a similar background, but they're going to have the education and you're not. And whether that's a riff within your company, a job that you're going out for, or, you know, just really to be able to get to that next salary band because they only have a limited amount of money to provide for promotional raises and et cetera, there's going to come a point in time where that affects you. What you need to look at is how much it affects you financially and opportunity-wise and just overall quality of life versus the cost and time that you're going to have to go to put in to get that degree. And for some people, it'll be worth doing, and for others, it won't. But don't go into it thinking this is going to be your salvation, because quite frankly, it's not always going to be.
Very well said. Thank you, Crystal. And then Katie Bardot, if you could finish us off with the your reply to that question.
Okay. I don't think I can add much to what Crystal and Lindsay said, both beautiful answers. Basically, like I would say, for some positions, some majors, bachelor's degree will set you for life. You know, engineering is the top one, computer science is another one, applied math, statistics are other ones. But then there's, you know, nursing's another one. But then there's other fields that a master's degree is becoming almost the new norm and is kind of required in some ways, even though it's not necessarily required. And that's definitely true. I'm seeing that more in the world of economics. And, you know, it's very common for people where previously they didn't need higher education. Now a lot of the positions are asking for higher education economics. And one thing to keep in mind with graduate degrees is you definitely learn some additional skills in graduate school than you do in undergrad school. You learn ways of critical thinking, you know, a little bit more independent work, a little bit just kind of more analysis skills than you had in undergrad. So those skills are very useful and very applicable to a lot of different roles. But like Crystal said, it's really important to remember that just because you go and get a higher degree doesn't mean a whole bunch of doors are going to be open for you. You really need to still set yourself apart. You know, volunteer where you're going to grad school. Go to a grad school that is, you know, accredited if it's online, or go to one that has a really strong program and is ranked highly. You know, do it in a part-time and work at the same time so you don't lose out on valuable work experience. Really just keep in mind that going to school is not necessarily always the answer. You have to do a lot of research and really kind of figure out what is the correct path for you and for what you want to do.
That's some good, solid advice to end on. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Crystal, and everyone else who participated. Aubrey wrote in with a question. This was a great G+ Hangout, our first one ever. I think we all got to share and learn a lot. PayScale was happy to host. We're looking forward to doing more G+ Hangouts on other topics, and look forward to seeing you back here again. Please write us with any more questions or thoughts you have, and we'll have some follow-up blog posts and other media around this topic. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.